The Bears hired Matt Eberflus, and he's a defensive-minded head coach. This has brought out a lot of debate of whether or not he was the right hire for Justin Fields' development. Justin Fields didn't have the best season last year. He ranked dead last amongst all starting quarterbacks in QBR, and now he's having a defensive-minded head coach come into the fold of things. Who knows what this does for him? Luke Getsy is their OC who's coming from Green Bay. So what do you think? I mean, what do you think about this move? Do you think this was the right move for the Bears for Justin Fields?
For Justin Fields, probably not. I'm assuming you'd want to bring in an offensive mind to really work with him. But in terms of the hire itself, this defensive-minded head coach, he wouldn't have been my first choice personally. He had a great success with the Colts, no doubt about it. Brian Flores is sitting right here, and we understand what's going on in the NFL now. We're going to talk about it later. Brian Flores, to me, if you want to bring in a defensive-minded head coach, this was the obvious decision. Brian Flores last season ranked 6th in points. This season, the defense was up and down, but towards the end of the season, it really showed great strides from week 1 to week 18. It was at a different place, but you could say that was schedule-based, but Brian Flores had shown already in his career that he can make a difference on the defense. Year 1, they were not supposed to do what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to be the worst team in the NFL and somehow still managed to bring them 5 wins. With the personnel that the Bears have, you could have brought Brian Flores in. He immediately elevates them again. So if that's the case, if you wanted to go defensive, I would have looked at Brian Flores, no doubt. But in terms of benefiting Justin Fields, I guess what options are there right now available? Eric Bieniemy, like we mentioned earlier. Caldwell for sure. Pep Hamilton would have been one, but I feel like as if to bring him from a quarterback coach to a head coaching job at this point in his career would have been a little bit too drastic. I still think you could bring him in as an offensive coordinator, which would be absolutely best case scenario where you have this guy who's been great, historically known for developing young quarterbacks. That would be interesting. But in terms of go ahead.
Pep is actually the front runner to
for
be OC in New York with the Giants.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's super intriguing to me because I'm already extremely high on DJ.
They're building a really good staff.
I love to hear that. Now, there we go. Who's going to step into this offensive coordinator slot?
It's Luke Getsy.
Yeah, they know.
Oh, it's official, Dory?
From the
Wow,
Packers.
okay.
He was a quarterback's coach in Green Bay.
Mm-hmm. And that's great, too, because I remember they were talking about him potentially being a head coach candidate as well, for someone the Broncos were looking at. And that's interesting, especially given the fact that he's worked with Rodgers. But Jordan Love, in his appearance this season, did not look fantastic by any means. So I do have a little bit of concerns about that. You don't have to worry about Rodgers, but you have to worry about this young developing guy in Jordan Love who you used a first-round draft pick on. So that does worry me a little bit. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't love it whatsoever. I mean, I would have really liked for them to bring in someone that really would focus and hone in on Justin Fields and his strengths. And right now, I don't feel like they did that.
Yeah, I think Eberflus he's a great defensive mind, right? And that's kind of how the NFL and people perceive the Bears, back in the 80s, the tough Bears with, all their guys that they had. So going from Nagy, who's an offensive guy, to a defensive guy doesn't shock me. We see that a ton between NFL teams. Just you're going to go from one opposite to the other, where it's offense, defense, personality. We see it with the Broncos with Fangio and Hackett now. He's a great DC, right? The Colts were the only team the past 2 seasons to rank top 10 scoring, rushing yards, and takeaways. We know he's a great coach, but that's not going to what makes or break him, right? Just like it is with Nathaniel Hackett. How's the quarterback going to play? Different because they have a quarterback in Justin Fields while you guys are still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Nagy and Pace were the tandem that traded up multiple picks to get Justin Fields 11 overall. So I was a bit worried going into this how invested are they in Justin Fields? Because they're not tied to him specifically. They don't have a first this year because of him, so they're going to do everything they can so he could win. But it is different when you're able to go and select your guy. They did ask Eberflus, and I don't think Getsy was at the press conference, but they asked him about, what do you think about Justin Fields, this and that. And it was mostly just, regular speak, like, oh, we're excited. And same thing. They asked Justin Fields, who was actually the only player to interview at the press conference. They brought him in, which was a really good sign, I thought. They're making it obvious, like, he's our franchise guy. There's no questions here. And he brought up an interesting point because one of the reporters asked him, what are your thoughts on getting a defensive-minded head coach? And I kind of had the same thought as you guys. Like, I'd want an offensive guy, but he made an interesting point and said, I kind of like it because the defensive or the head coach has huge responsibility. He has to overlook the entire team, offense and defense. And now that I have a defensive head coach, now I could just talk to the OC and he's just worrying about the offense, about what we're doing. And he doesn't have, all that responsibility that a head coach might not have. And that's something I really haven't heard in the past. And I know I saw it in the comments, it was funny. They're like, oh, well, what if Getsy's so good and someone takes him and he's a head coach in 3 years? And I'm like, bro, if he's a head coach in 3 years, that means Justin Fields broke out. He's a top 10 quarterback. Yep. It's the same thing with the Jets. And when we hired Mike LaFleur, they're like, oh, well, what if he's a head coach in 3 years? I'm like, well, then that means Zach Wilson is borderline elite. So I don't care if he's a head coach, because if you're able to go from coordinator to head coach, it means you had great success. So on Eberflus, I think he's going to be great defensive side of the ball. Now, getting to Getsy, who's really the more intriguing piece here, because he's going to be the one who's developing Justin Fields. He's a former quarterback, led Akron to their only MAC championship in 2005, so he has some playing experience. He's also known for being like another coach on the field during his playing time. Seems like a really smart guy. He was also responsible for third down with the Packers and really helped bring RPOs to their offense as well, which I think is something that the Bears should be doing a lot more of with Justin Fields, as well as read options, getting his legs involved too. He hasn't called any plays before in the past. He is part of the game plans, obviously, but we know LaFleur is the main guy there. But I think more than anything, when you look at this Bears team and their offense, it's a personnel issue more than anything, right? The coaching has to get better. But when you look at their team, they allowed the most sacks in the NFL. Darnell Mooney's a really good receiver. I don't know if he's an alpha number one, no doubt about it, receiver. And they have no depth behind him unless you're talking about Marquise Goodwin or Damiere Byrd. Like, those are their wide receiver twos and threes.
Agents.
And
Jakeem Grant also.
And Allen Robinson. So there's really no wide receivers. I don't even know who their next wide receiver would be outside of Darnell Mooney. They have a couple good pieces with Cole Kmet and David Montgomery. So I expect them to run a pretty run-heavy offense and play action based off of that. They also don't have a first-round pick this year because of Justin Fields, so it's going to be a bit difficult to bring in talent on the offensive side of the ball unless you're going to go for those second or third tier of free agents potentially in wide receivers. And I don't really see many people going to play in Chicago unless you're getting huge money from them. So I don't expect them to be in the market for Chris Godwin or Mike Williams. Like I said, I think A-Rob walks. So
you don't think guys would be interested in playing with Fields?
I don't think they're going out of their way to do it in Chicago.
Fair.
He hasn't proven himself yet.
Yeah,
but if the money's there,
if you're going to give them the bag, then sure.
Yeah, fair.
But I think more than anything, they need to revamp this offense, the offensive line, the wide receivers. Hopefully Cole Kmet, usually year 3 is the year tight ends break out, so maybe he could have a good season. But I think they need to just revamp this offense, and then from there we could really see what the coaching staff can do.
I think Matt Eberflus is a good coach. I really do. And I think he's a culture setter. My worry is not about if he can coach or if he can assemble a staff. That's not my worry. My worry is that Ryan Poles, the GM, had the final say in who he was going to hire as coach. And the Bears were not all in on who the coach was going to be, because they hired a search committee led by Bill Polian to hire a coach and GM. There's rumors out there that say that the Bears didn't want Matt as head coach, that ownership and the search committee had different options in mind for the coach. In my opinion, it was Jim Caldwell. That would have been my pick for the coach. That's just, I think he would, offensive minded, would have been great with Fields. But I guess if they want to get back to the roots defensively, they can do it because they have the pieces to do it. Roquan Smith is one of the better linebackers in football. He can play a similar role just as a Mike as like Darius Leonard. We know Darius Leonard's a weak side linebacker, but Roquan Smith can have a breakout year with Matt.
He's legit for sure.
You got Jalen Johnson. Thomas Graham in his limited snaps showed a lot of impressive plays and coverage. And they have Robert Quinn still, Khalil Mack. So they have some talent. Artie Burns wasn't too bad for them last year. And also Travis Gibson, who's a 24-year-old pass rusher, who's pretty darn good too. So they have talent on this defense. But when we think about the Bears, we never think about defense being their problem. It's about offense, and it's been that way for a while. You talked about what Justin Fields said about the benefits of having a defensive-minded head coach. I think those are spot on, and that was a great answer. But the Bears' success is ultimately, it comes down to how good Fields can be. I was not high on Justin Fields before the draft. I know the talent is there, but mechanically, throwing the ball is not there. You talk about the sacks. Justin Fields had the worst QBR in the league, had the worst sack rate in the NFL, worst off-target rate in the NFL. But he was 8th in rushing, estimated points added, so I guess that does something. He took so many sacks, not because the Bears' offensive line is so abysmal.
It's bad.
It's not as bad as you think.
It's not good.
It's Justin Fields running into sacks and running into pressure makes it look worse. The statistics are swayed that way. But the same thing with the Jets. Like, the Jets' offensive line this past season wasn't horrible. You were a top 15 ranked offensive line. We were the 13th ranked offensive line. But Zach took a lot of unnecessary sacks, held the ball long, and that's what made our O-line look worse. Fields right now is still learning, and that's why I never bought into the narrative that he was ready to go out of college, because he wasn't. It was clear he had to develop. He has a talent, but he had to develop, that's for sure. But Bears fans were impatient. NFL fans were impatient. Oh, just throw him in there. Who cares? Throw him in there. Fire Nagy if you don't start Fields. Now Fields starts. 7 touchdowns, 10 picks. Worst quarterback in the league QBR-wise. He should have sat and developed last year. The thing that you pointed out, this isn't this coaching staff's guy. Matt Nagy walked in with Trubisky not being his guy. Now Matt is doing the same thing with Fields. Fields, we can say, has more talent than Trubisky. Yeah, I guess you can say that. Even though Mitch he's had more success than him. He's been to the Pro Bowl at least in the second season.
Fields started 10 games in his career.
Is he going to be a Pro Bowler in the second year? Mitch was.
Maybe, who knows?
I mean, we don't know, but I'm just saying.
And that was his ceiling.
Mitch was.
Who cares about Pro Bowl?
Mitch was not as bad as everybody thought he was. He just wasn't.
He's an average guy.
He is an average guy. Maybe Fields is an average guy.
Maybe.
I'm just saying. The reason I'm not too high on this hire is because I feel like they had to go all in to getting the perfect guy to develop Fields, because I'm not super high on Fields. I'm just not. And ultimately, if he doesn't pan out, this coaching staff is going to get recycled again, and there's going to be somebody new come in, a new quarterback, and the cycle is going to repeat itself.
Fields had some good games this year, though. He showed flashes. The Pittsburgh game, he had a good game against Green Bay. Like, it wasn't all terrible. He had flashes.
2 games where he threw under 38%.
He had some bad games for sure, like the game against his.
And that Green Bay game, I didn't think was like. I really didn't think he played that well. I'll just be honest.
You're a hater.
It was a slant that got taken 80 yards.
Nah, he had some good games though, for sure. I'm not gonna sit here and
Pittsburgh
let you say
game,
he was
played
terrible.
very well.
Yeah,
I thought
great.
the Pittsburgh game was the only great game of the season outside of Week 18. That's it.
He's a rookie. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and call him a bust after a rookie season where
I'm not calling him a bust.
No, I understand.
I'm just saying that's what it was.
It's again, I'm not going to be so cutthroat to say that he's not going to be able to get the job done, and I'm not going to be on the opposite spectrum of saying that this guy's going to be an all-pro one day. I'm just not going to be so quick to pull the trigger on Justin Fields just yet, given the fact that rookie quarterbacks just don't always come in and act like a Kyler Murray, don't always come in and act like a Justin Herbert, a Joe Burrow. It's a rarity that these guys come in and really leave the impact that they do, at least statistically and in terms of winning.
His 2 games where he was under 30%. One was his first start against Cleveland where he got sacked like 20 times. In the second game, he threw 11 passes and got hurt. Some context, please.
That Cleveland game was abysmal.
It was
that was his first start, and that
play
pass
call,
rush was
bro.
crazy.
I remember, I don't know if it was on the show, but I remember the play calling was absolutely ridiculous.
His passes, his accuracy was absolutely abysmal.
But he had good games. His last full game that he was healthy against Minnesota, he had over 300 total yards and a touchdown, 96 quarterback rating, completed 67% of his passes. San Francisco, 70% completion percentage, over 270 total. Like, he's had really good games and really good moments.
Minnesota's a 29th ranked
Minnesota
defense.
was your team. You thought they were going to the Super Bowl probably.
No, I
You
did
picked them
not.
every week.
Every
No,
single
I
week.
didn't.
17
I don't
weeks.
want. You can't talk shit about Minnesota when they were your team.
What do you
the
mean
entire
their
year.
defense sucks, bro? What are you talking about? That's a fact.
And when I said Buffalo's defense was amazing, you're like, oh, wait a second. So I don't know.
No, it's just they're just not lock up number one ranked defense in the NFL like you thought they were.
You
But
gotta
they
play
are
their
statistically,
opponent.
they were number one.
And I don't care, bro, because
But
that's what you're saying. But now,
context
Bills,
matters.
the
But
Bills
that's
stuff is
exactly what
ridiculous
he's
because
saying.
I saw Mac Jones have 300-yard games. I saw Zach Wilson have 300-yard games. I saw Trevor Lawrence have good
What are you
games.
talking about?
You're saying because we went through their schedule and you looked at all the quarterbacks that they played, all the teams, and they weren't great. But I also all these teams and all these quarterbacks have good games against other opponents, but not against Buffalo. So which one is it?
What are you talking about? Okay, the one game Mac Jones played in Buffalo, it was freezing temperature. They let him throw the ball 3 times.
I'm not talking about that specifically because yes, that's going to skew it a bit. But when you go down the entire list, you're acting like every quarterback there just always had bad games. When in reality, they just played poorly against Buffalo because they have a good defense.
Outside of the Bucks and Chiefs, they didn't face a top 10 offense all year.
Okay, but Zach Wilson had 300-yard games. Mac Jones had 300-yard games. Trevor Lawrence had some
Zach
good games.
Wilson had a 300-yard. So just because Zach Wilson had a 300-yard game against who? Who was it again?
Maybe it wasn't 300, but still 2 touchdown games. Like they've had good games in the past.
Okay, the one game Zach played against Buffalo, our best receiver was Berrios. Elijah Moore was out. Corey Davis was out.
Week 18.
Even our starting tight end was out.
He threw for 297 against the Titans. I'm counting it.
But you're acting like
Come on, bro.
players could have good games
bro.
and they almost never did against Buffalo.
Okay, but
That's all I'm
Buffalo's
saying.
secondary is look. I'm not about to argue about Buffalo for 30 minutes because they are just not an elite pass defense secondary wise. They're not.
I'm just saying it
They're
because you
not.
brought up the Minnesota thing and it sparked my mind.
They were literally abysmal this year.
Because what if Minnesota played
On
12
defense.
amazing offenses? Like, we're going to be like, oh, well, if you
I mean,
really
they
look
did.
at
They,
it.
they did have a good schedule,
Like, bro.
but they
like,
got burnt.
at the end of the
Bashard
day-
Breeland was toast, bro.
I'm just saying. Justin
Mackenzie
Fields,
Alexander was toast. Like, come on, bro.
Fields overall didn't have a great season. I thought
He
he
had
some
the
good
worst
moments.
season of any starting quarterback.
He was a
behind
rookie
Zach
with
Wilson.
a terrible line, and he has barely any weapons. He has Darnell
The
Mooney
line
out
is
there, and
not
that's
as bad
it.
as you think it is.
It's
He
not
made it look
good.
way worse.
It's not
He
good,
made it
bro.
look way worse.
And where was Zach Wilson in QBR?
He was right in front of him.
We're all super high on Zach, so we can't just say QBR and be like, oh, he's the worst because his bottom QBR, and be like, oh, Zach's the second worst, but we think he's gonna be a top 5 quarterback.
You know that Zach Wilson he faced the toughest schedule of pass
Yes,
defense in the NFL,
I'm
right?
well aware. I watched
Yeah,
every
Fields
game.
was nowhere near that list.
I watched every game.
Okay, all right.
Just because you have a one
The
bad
world.
stats
I mean, the
QBR.
world. I mean, I'm still high on Zach, but the world is pretty much low on Zach.
All of us here are pretty high on Zach, so.
But the world is pretty much low on Zach. Like, I think PFF even thinks he's going to be garbage and all. Like,
But I'm
outside
I'm
of
just
Jets
saying,
fans,
bro,
people think Zach is not going to be good.
we can't look at the one stat and be like, well, our guy who we think is gonna be the best is just
It's not the
barely
one
ahead
stat.
of him.
It's not just the one stat, bro. It's accuracy. It's QBR.
Like, bro,
it's-
Zach and
it's
Fields
sack
both had
rate.
great moments and terrible moments.
People think that quarterbacks taking sack is always on the offensive line when it's not.
I
bro.
understand it's
It's
not, but when
not.
you're number 1 in sacks allowed to Fields, to Dalton, to Foles, it wasn't just Fields. When you allowed the most sacks, I can't just be like, it was probably mostly Fields' fault. No, you give up 58 sacks, bro. That's not something you just do and be like, oh, I guess we'll try again next
So
year.
you think Justin's the guy?
I think Justin should be the guy in Chicago. What's your other option? I
No,
agree.
no. I know. I'm just saying, like, you think he's going to be a great quarterback.
I'm not there yet. I need to see.
So
I
you
need to
just
see this
rambled
year.
on this much to tell me you don't have a definitive opinion on it.
Because you think he's going to
You
be.
put him in the mud. You're putting him in the mud. He's
No, I'm
defending
not.
it. You were put. Oh my god.
At least if you ask me if I think Zach's going to be nice, I'm going to say yes.
Because I understand Justin has some stuff to work on. I think his number one thing, you touched on it, is his delivery is slow.
Okay,
but he had good moments.
This entire segment, what did I say? He has a lot to work on. Not once did I call him a bust. Did I, Drew?
Bro,
I don't know,
bro,
the way
talking
Drew-
about
well,
the
I'll tell
QBR.
you
He's
this.
the worst QBR in the
Correct.
NFL. He was the
What
worst
am I
quarterback
supposed
in
to
the
say?
NFL this
He
year.
was.
He had
What am I
he
supposed
brought
to
up-
say?
he brought up the
What am I supposed to
30%.
say?
He brought up the 30% completion percentage. One was his first start against the Cleveland Browns defense, who
Bro,
allowed
that-
10
you were
sacks.
pooping on him.
His
You were
second-
pooping on him.
His
Bro,
second
that's what I took
time-
away, too.
His second
I thought
time,
you were
he had
trash talking him.
11
Oh
pass
my
attempts and got
gosh.
injured.
That's
Where's
what
the
I took-
context?
Joel, that's what I took away from it as
Oh
well.
And
my
that's why I
gosh,
had to
bro.
start defending him, because you brought up that stat. And I was like, I don't remember these games. I'm like, oh,
Bro,
yeah, he got killed.
Cleveland, bro, he was so inaccurate
He
in
would
that
look
game.
terrible.
Bro, he
I
got
understand that.
sacked a
It's his
stupid amount
first
of
start of
times.
the year. It's week 3, his rookie year.
So he had preseason. He had 3 weeks to sit and learn. He didn't look good in preseason either. What the hell? What are you talking about here?
Bro.
At least
I
Zach
just
looked
want
good.
some context.
At least Zach
I just want some
At least
context.
Zach looked perfect in preseason.
I want some context.
We at least saw that.
I want some context.
Okay, where are you at with Justin Fields? And tell me that context. I want to know.
I think he's going to be a good quarterback.
I think so too, personally.
Okay. Give me like a number ranking.
I mean, well, it's hard because it's so much is dependent on the organization, how much they believe in him. If they're all in and they go out and make moves,
all right,
then sure.
So 1 to 10, how confident are you that he could be a solid franchise guy?
I'm at like a 7.
I was going to say around the same.
Because
it's a bad number.
Because when I look at
where are you at? 4?
I'm at 3.
When I look at just his talent, yes, it's all there, but I don't trust the Bears as much as like the Jets, who have proven to go out and get
like
weapons
the Jets.
for
Are
him.
you serious?
The Jets went out. They drafted Mekhi Becton in the first round last year. AVT traded up to get him. Signed Corey Davis. Drafted Elijah Moore in the second round. Drafted Michael Carter in the fourth
about
round.
to lose his job.
I'm just saying
Is he?
they went out and made all these moves.
Why do you say
Robert
Mekhi?
Saleh just said
did.
that Mekhi Becton is not guaranteed the starting spot.
Maybe to motivate
Becton
him.
was the year before, but even in the 1 year they draft
Okay.
Zach Wilson was the most they have ever done for a quarterback I've seen in my life, probably since like Sanchez. And when Sanchez came in, we already had the whole team. We just brought in the Santonio Holmes, the Brilliant Edwards. The offensive line was the best in the NFL. We already had Sean Green, brought in LT. But this was the most I've seen the Jets ever do in one offseason to help their quarterback.
The GM for the Bears, Ryan Poles, said that we're going to take back the North and never give it back.
If Rodgers leaves, maybe. If Rodgers leaves, the
If
division's up for
Rodgers
grabs.
leaves, the division's wide open.
Actually, no. You want to know why?
Jordan Love.
No, because
I don't know who's gonna root for it. Jordan Love, Minnesota. Who's next?
No, you want to know? I like
You
Jordan.
like Detroit too? Like who knows?
Nah, this makes sense because it segues perfectly. Yes, I get it. I know where he's going.